Hello, I'm the Artivist, and we are going to dig right into this. I'm going to rewind a little bit and discuss Joe Biden talking about Social Security cuts and his claim that he never said he was going to cut Social Security. So we're going to dig into this. We're going to watch Joe Biden talk about Social Security.
When I argued that we should freeze federal spending, I meant Social Security as well. I meant Medicare and Medicaid. I meant veterans benefits. I meant every single solitary thing in the government. And I not only tried it once, I tried it twice, I tried it a third time.
Okay, that wasn't it. Let's try this one.
I tried with Senator Grassley back in the 80s to freeze all government spending, including Social Security, including everything.
Hey now, take it easy, Joe. You're certainly trying to cut it there. Let's try this one.
The American people know we have to fix Social Security. They know we can't grow our way to a solution. They know we're going to have to make some tough decisions.
All right, we'll give them one more try.
But deficit. We have Social Security and Medicare looming. The number of people on Social Security and Medicare is now 40 million people. It's going to be 80 million in 15 years. Would you consider looking at those programs, age of eligibility,
Absolutely.
cost of living, put it all on the table?
The answer is absolutely, you have to.
Jesus, Biden. Is there any tape in which you're not trying to cut Social Security? I mean, let's get real. Joe Biden is basically a Republican with a Democratic name tag. Mike Bloomberg doesn't even wear the name tag. He's just a Republican who says he's Democrat, but he really is not. He just joined the party a couple years ago and made his first donation to the Democratic Party a couple months before he ran for president. But this is the trick they do. They give wealthy people and corporations tax cuts, which puts a strain on our deficit. They need to get the money somewhere, so they raid our entitlements, do regressive taxes such as increased fines and taxes on other things like gasoline, traffic, and parking tickets, cigarettes, basically anything they could tax or fine, which creates an imbalance by taxing the poor at a greater percentage of their income than the wealthy. Then, because they depleted funds in something like Social Security by reallocating those funds to the rich and wealthy corporations and tax cuts, they say we have to cut it even further and privatize it now because there's not enough money to keep the system in place. And then when they privatize it, they'll give those contracts to their wealthy friends and their companies who will get an even larger hand in the money grab. And then those wealthy friends and their companies get even bigger tax cuts, so they further raid other benefits that help the general public, like the police, public libraries, food stamps, as evidenced by Trump recently kicking a bunch of people off the program and then monstrously taking credit for those people being off welfare during his State of the Union address by insinuating that they were doing better financially rather than him actually kicking them out. We've seen this also with the defunding of the United States Post Office, where UPS and FedEx have come into play to fill in those gaps. We've seen an increase in private and charter schools, private prisons, etc., etc. It's an old trick. Deplete funds until it creates issues, and then say the government just can't run things properly, so we have to privatize it, when in reality it could be run effectively. But they just drained all the accounts to make up for those tax cuts for the rich, so they can't run it with the same efficiency. So we as a society suffer worse and get drained and drained further. It's an unending cycle. So for instance, let's talk about the regressive taxes I was talking about earlier. I received a traffic ticket years ago for crossing a double yellow line. That ticket back in the early 90s cost me $60. A ticket for the exact same violation just 2 years ago cost me $300. That's 5 times the amount. Now, you say it's just a normal general inflation, but let's take a closer look at the numbers. The federal minimum wage when I received that $60 ticket was $4.25 an hour. If all things were equal, to pay the current $300 ticket, the federal minimum wage should be $21.25 an hour. So let's see what it is today. $7.25 an hour. Nationally, that ticket should have only been $102. In California at the time, the minimum wage was $12 an hour when I received a ticket. So the traffic ticket, if it was comparable, it should be about $180, but not $300. So you see, the wages just aren't holding up to the increased costs of everything else. Since the early 1970s, the wealth of the upper 0.01% has increased by 6,000%. It's not a joke. That's actually what has happened. That's the actual number. But wages have stagnated. If wages were rising naturally with production, like it was doing before the early 1970s, we'd all be making an average of more than $17,000 a year, more than we do now. So let's break that down, dividing that $17,000 by 52 weeks, and then by 40 hours a week. And that came to a little more than $8 an hour on top of what we make now, no matter what job you do. That means the federal minimum wage should be $15.25 to $15.50 an hour, and add $8 more to any area where your minimum wage is higher. Like here in California, the minimum minimum wage is currently $13 an hour. So $13 plus $8 an hour would equal $21 an hour minimum wage, which is right where the $21.25 an hour minimum wage I estimated earlier would be to properly compensate for the $300 traffic ticket. So let's go even further. I went to a California State University school here for college. My price per semester was right around $480. No joke. Again, at the time, it was also a $4.25 minimum wage, which is what I worked for at the time. And my little niece who graduated at the same school a couple years ago, was paying over $3,000 a semester there. To keep up with that cost, the minimum wage would be around $30 an hour. So you see how we keep getting drained. We can't keep up with the costs. You can't even look at the housing in my area in San Diego, which in 2018 increased in cost by 5.5%, while wages increased only 2.8%. We have rent control that just went into effect here that caps off at 6.7%, but wages are estimated to increase only 3.1%. So no one will ever catch up. Trump bragged about that 3.1% wage increase, which, believe it or not, is the highest wage increase in the last 10 years. Yet it isn't even half of what the local housing increase is. So how do we keep up with that? And these older people who think that what they went through and what we're going through are comparable, it just isn't. So let's listen to Biden talking about how tough it was.
There was a war raging. There was a bitter fight over even whether we should talk about the environment. Women were still viewed as second-class citizens and not prepared to have significant jobs, thought that. And we were told the people didn't talk to one another over the war. You know, shortly after I graduated in '68, Kent State, 17 kids shot dead. And so the younger generation now tells me how tough things are. Give me a break. No. I have no empathy for it. Give me a break. Because here's the deal, guys. We decided we were going to change the world, and we did.
Oh, you changed it all right. For the worst. You've created the worst economic inequality since the time of the ancient Egyptians. The environment, you've created such a catastrophe, it may literally wipe us out on a biblical scale. The Vietnam War lasted 10 years. We've been at war for 19 years. Entire generation raised in war. And let's talk about the generational wealth gap. And generationally, as far as income and finances are concerned, let's take a look at the statistics. Generally, the older you are, the better you've done. So collectively, boomers at age 35 had 21% of the nation's wealth. Generation X, which was my generation, it dropped to 9% of the nation's wealth at age 35. And millennials have dropped to estimated 3%. That's an 18% decrease in the nation's wealth at the same age. The boomer generation currently has 56% of the nation's wealth. So no, they don't get it. Next time the older generation tells you got by on nothing and still made it so they have no compassion for you, tell them to take their income at the time and then reduce it by an additional 35 to 55%. And then ask them if they think they would have gotten by on that. I guarantee they probably wouldn't have. And then tell them that's exactly what you're doing. If you're making it, it's because on top of everything else, you're overcoming this income disadvantage as well, which they didn't have. The people I've talked to in that generation have no clue. So vote, young people, vote. Don't let people who don't understand your situation make the decisions for you. Educate those who don't know the truth, and please take initiative and go vote. So when Joe Biden talks about growing up in rough times on one side of the mouth while also talking about cutting Social Security on the other, or Mike Bloomberg tells you if you're too old, you'll probably have to die instead of getting health care, which he did.
You know, you show up with prostate cancer and you're 95 years old. We should say, go and enjoy, have a nice meal, lead a long life. There's no cure. And you can't do anything. If you're a young person, we should do something about it. Society's not willing to do that yet.
You could tell them to jump off a bridge because they have no idea what you go through. None. And that's why I'm voting for Bernie Sanders, because he gets it and he's addressing these issues from multiple angles. Don't be fooled by the propaganda, false news reporting, and false narratives. Educate yourself, and together let's change things. Let's do this. TheDailyWalrus.com